Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to our Sunday gathering in Sk'aliCh'elh-tenaut's legacy. Continuing to meet each and every week with this cool group of people to spread education and awareness about all things affecting our orcas, our southern residents, and all of our ocean life. So thanks for being with us today. We'll go around the room real quick with our regulars to say hello, and then we're going to jump right in with our very special guest today. Deborah, how are you?
I'm good. Got my pen in hand, ready to take notes and learn some stuff to share. So thank you for joining us, David.
Yeah. We're going to learn a lot today. Ma, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Glad to be here.
Christina?
Hey, I'm good. Happy to be here. Interested to learn some stuff from David, and hopefully we'll be able to change some things. Yeah. So thanks, David.
Yeah.
Marcia?
Same, I'm good. Very interested in today's show and how we can help this horrible thing that's happening to our ocean. So happy to be here and to share all this information.
Thank you. Deb Cruz?
Hanging tough.
As usual.
As usual.
Our tough Deb Cruz. Howard, how are you today?
Doing well. It's a fine day here. Looking forward to hearing from David. I've been following the trawl page for a long time, and I'm not entirely up to date, so I'll be taking notes and looking for what we can do. But I do want to report, since our last meeting, I don't even know if this can be read, but Exeter University bestowed a doctorate of science on my brother, Ken Balcom.
Awesome.
The president of Exeter, who has been partnering with the Center for Whale Research for over a decade, came out with the whole team and put on a beautiful soiree at the aquarium and gave Ken finally the doctorate that he deserved 45 years ago. So this was a great event.
That's awesome. Well deserved. Well deserved. Thank you, Howard. And I know we were last week, we kind of took a pause a little bit last week to send our vibes out there for Brave Little Hunter. And so we kind of took a little break, but I thank you for remembering to talk about that, Howard. Ken is so deserving of that. And I'm really glad you were able to be there to accept that on his behalf. It's beautiful.
It was a really momentous occasion, really big time. Never forget it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, guys, we have David Bays with us today. Just a little, there's a lot about David, but I'll just share a little bit. So David is born and raised in Homer, Alaska, Alaskan resident for 41 years. He has his bachelor's degree in biology and secondary education from University of Montana. He's the owner, operator, and founder of Deep Strike Sports Fishing in Homer, Alaska since 2003. He's also founder of Bays Boat Rental in Homer, Alaska since 2014. And for us, what we're going to talk about today, he has worked extensively as a volunteer to raise social media awareness on issues of trawl bycatch in Alaska, and currently leading and moderating a group of just under 35,000 individuals, which I have a feeling after today, it'll go over 35,000 individuals. And this group is Stop Alaskan Trawler Bycatch, guys. So you want to look that up, and we'll put the link in there pretty soon. But let's get into it. David, welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey, everybody. So I guess what had originally brought me to this issue is I've got the biology background, and I had started we do guided fishing, deep sea fishing in Alaska, and there'd always kind of been this rumbling in the background of each year the fisheries regulators will set poundages for say how many pounds of halibut can be caught by all user groups combined. And the way they set it now is that they come up with a number, say it's 10 million pounds, and they say, well, but trawl bycatch is going to catch 2 million pounds of that, so we're going to take that off the top, and then we're going to split up all the rest of it, all the other users. And for people that don't know, most of the trawl bycatch, especially on a group they call prohibited species, which includes like halibut, crab, salmon, they're not allowed to retain it, and they're not allowed to sell it, and they're not supposed to catch it in the first place. But there's just kind of this acknowledgement that the way trawl nets work, they can't catch fish one at a time. They just scoop the net through the water, and it essentially catches everything. So there's this acknowledgement that, yeah, they're going to catch some crab, they're going to catch some halibut, but they can't help it, essentially. So we're going to let them do it. Anyways, but as fish populations have shrunk, they've really restricted the fishing limits for all the other user groups, but there's still kind of this acknowledgement out there that, well, the trawl boats can't help it. And so what used to be that maybe they set aside 20% of the total catch for trawl, as the total catch has fallen, sometimes that's 50% of the catch goes to trawl or more. And so that was what had originally gotten me into it. But as we've dug in further, we started to run into these marine mammal encounters. So in 2023, trawl reported catching 10 killer whales in the Bering Sea. NOAA Fisheries later released a report saying that 6 of those they assumed had died in the net, and the other 4 were dead before they'd been caught, which leads to its own set of questions, but that's an aside. And then there's the ecological damage. So I tell a lot of people that the best way to get started into this conversation is to just Google effects of bottom trawling, and you'll see this worldwide perspective. It's been banned outright in a lot of nations already. A lot of people are fighting with it. It's always been controversial. In the USA, there's always this conversation about Grand Banks cod. A lot of people remember that. I think in '92 was when that was formally closed, and trawling had been to blame for that. And the same thing had happened with West Coast groundfish. So I think in the early 2000s, that crashed and closed, and they blamed trawl for that, and they're just beginning to reopen it. But as those other USA fisheries have closed, these big factory trawl boats don't have anywhere to go. They have to catch fish in order to keep up with expenses, essentially. So we've actually got boats that had participated in the crash of Grand Banks cod in the 90s that moved to Alaska and are now fishing in Alaskan waters now with the same ownership and the same boats and the same set of problems. And the same deal with the West Coast groundfish. So like the Oregon and Washington boats, when trawl closed there from overfishing, they went to Alaska because that was the next frontier. But now we see all these same problems. So that's the quick and dirty of it.
David, there's a comment in the comment section to explain the difference between troll and trawl, because apparently in the translation it's coming up saying troll instead of trawl. Sure.
Yeah, so troll is TROLL, like a troll that lives under the bridge, but that's the term that they use for when a boat is using the boat's engine to drag individual fishing lures through the water. So they catch one fish per hook, and in the big scheme of fishing, that's a pretty clean way of fishing. There's no contact with the bottom. Typically the bycatch is very low. If they do catch the wrong kind of fish, they reel it up essentially, and they can unhook a single hook out of the fish's mouth, and it has a good chance of surviving. But what we're talking about is trawl. That's TRAWL. And the other term for trawling is dragging, and that's probably the more simplistic view, because that word essentially explains everything. So when the boats trawl, they drag a net through the bottom, and that's almost like, or through the water column, and that's almost like a strainer going through the water. So trawl nets are really indiscriminate by design. They're made to catch a bunch of pounds of fish in as efficiently as possible. And when they're used that way, the way to make money with them is to just catch everything. Then you bring it up on deck, dump it out, throw away what you don't want or what you're not allowed to keep, and then the rest of it gets kept and sold. And when fish populations were amazing and untouched, that was okay-ish, you know, but it's 2024 now and everybody's working for their piece of the pie. We've got marine mammals starving to death. And there's still this group out there that's dragging nets indiscriminately, essentially. So.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You said there were other countries that have banned trawling.
Yeah.
Was that done through lawsuits or governmental? You know, do you know much about that? How they got it done?
I don't know a ton about it, and I think a fair amount of them have been partial bans. So there was just a headline last week about Greece doing a new trawl ban, and I didn't really dig through that, but I think that might have been in some of their marine protected areas. And the other part of trawl, at least in Alaska and the USA, is that they're the financial powerhouses in the fishing industry. So, where some of the sport fishing companies might net or gross, a couple $100,000 in a year, the trawl corporations might gross $1 billion in a year. So because of that, they've been able to hire lobbyists. They're pretty effective in DC and with local government and fish regulators too, to keep regulations loose, because that's what they need to get a bunch of fish in a small amount of time to profit. Anyway, so it's been, I think, in the USA and Alaska and other nations, it's really a public outcry that has forced government regulators kind of away from, stop listening to what the trawl lobbyists are telling you. We can see this on the fishing grounds, or this is a public resource and this isn't how we want you to allocate it to the big guys in the room. We want it to be sustainable. So, and sorry, that's not a great answer to your question, but I think it's public outcry. Driven it.
One of the other things, bottom trawling, and then what's the other one called?
Midwater.
Midwater. Can you talk a little bit about? I mean, it's still doing the damage that we're talking about, but can you talk about that a little bit, just so
for sure? So sorry about all the definitions, but NOAA Fisheries regulates most of the trawl in Alaska, and they kind of have these two definitions for how fishery is regulated. One is bottom trawl, and that is they intentionally put the big net down hard on the bottom of the ocean, and that's targeting like flounder and other fish that live in the mud or on the ocean. And so those are made to essentially bounce along the seafloor and kick those fish up into the net. And so you can imagine the ecological impact of that. We talk about cold water corals that might make 200 years to regrow, and seagrass. There's quite a bit of talk about carbon sequestered in the surface of the bottom. There was a recent New York Times article saying that bottom trawl releases as much carbon in a year as global airline traffic does. So that's one. And bottom trawl has been this big focus across the world. People know it's bad, and it's really getting cracked down on. But the other form of trawl is kind of a nomenclature thing, essentially. So they call that midwater trawl. And if you go and look at like a NOAA graphic, you'll see this very clean picture of here's the seafloor and then here's the net scooping across what they call midwater, not touching bottom, not having any ecological impact. But what's recently come out is they said that in the Bering Sea, depending on what type of boat is towing the trawl net and in what season they're fishing, that 40 to 100% of the time, the midwater nets are actually down hard on bottom. And so that's really come up as an issue because to protect things like crab stocks, NOAA Fisheries has banned a lot of the North Pacific seafloor to bottom trawling. There's not supposed to be any nets touching, but they haven't banned this class that they call midwater trawl, which we now know is down on bottom. So as they do like ecological surveys and try and figure out how much habitat is out there for the fish and crab, they have this flawed assumption that, well, we know that we banned, say, at 70% of the ocean to bottom trawl, so all that should be pristine, untouched habitat. But they have been allowing midwater trawl there, and now we know that midwater trawls are on bottom. So now you have this whole new set of problems with what we thought was pristine habitat. Might have been wiped clear. So I hope that helps. But or for definitions anyways.
No, it does. And I've been following the group for a while, and but there's just so much that I know I don't know about that. And there was an interesting comment on, I think it was on one of your pages about, if they were catching these orcas and putting them in captivity, there'd be an uproar, because that's our awareness, right? That's what but there's no uproar right now because people don't. I think it's that people don't know. I definitely don't think that's that people don't care. It's just people don't know. And I was like, we got to get this guy on here, because we all care. And people want to know what they can do. I don't really have a great format for the show, but like Marcia was talking about, and then there's a lawsuit now, right? Can we kind of jump, because I know everyone in this group for sure is already looking for, what can we do? How can we help? What do we support? Who do we write? Because that's what folks do. But can you tell us a little bit? I think it was the screenshot I have is from October of 2013.
Yeah. So are you talking about the Center for Biological Diversity? Yeah. So I'd mentioned at the start that in 2023, trawl in the Bering Sea had reported that they'd brought up 10 killer whales to the deck of their boat, and a lot of times they'll tow a net for 4 to 6 hours. So there begins to be this conversation about, well, we released the whale really quickly, but they can only hold their breath for 15 or 20 minutes max, is my understanding. So most everything that comes up is dead, or that's been the feedback I've had from the crews that I've spoken with. So anyways, they're catching a lot of orcas. So in response to that, the Center for Biological Diversity had filed this lawsuit against the Secretary of Commerce, National Marine Fisheries Service, NOAA Fisheries. And it's essentially to essentially say that those organizations aren't doing all they can to protect marine mammals under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. And so that's a pretty good start. I haven't seen many updates on that. As you can see here, this is from October of last year, but it's out there brewing. Another
19 pages. Another reason folks should join your group, your Facebook group, and go on there so they can get access to this information.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing to kind of fill in, especially for the taking action on this. So NOAA Fisheries regulates trawl more than 3 miles offshore in Alaska and more than 3 miles offshore around most of the U.S. That's when you fall into federal waters, which falls under NOAA Fisheries. But kind of a thing that people don't connect or realize is that NOAA Fisheries is underneath the umbrella of the Department of Commerce, and the Secretary of Commerce has to sign off on what NOAA Fisheries does. So that, I think, has been an important thing in leading us to this point where we're at now. Is we think of NOAA as, protecting marine mammals and this real ecological oriented organization, which it is. And I think the people that work there do well, but and have their heart in the right place for protecting the ocean. But from a policy level, they're under the Department of Commerce. So what the trawl fleet has been super effective at doing is they come in and say, yeah, sorry about all that bycatch, sorry about the ecological damage, but hey, we bring $2 billion a year into the U.S. economy. And the Department of Commerce goes for that. They say, oh, well, that's too bad about the seals. That's too bad about the whales. You guys are making a ton of money. I think somebody pointed this out in the comment that NOAA's under the Department of Commerce. So that's just, and a lot of, letters can be addressed to the Secretary of Commerce in DC. That's the person that has the final write-off on a lot of what NOAA Fisheries does. So.
I have a question about that. So, this is just an opinion question, I guess, but can that be moved from under that umbrella of commerce into, Deb Holland's zone of the interior somehow? I feel like it's a better place for it, honestly. I don't know if that's even a possibility.
Yeah, so that conversation has come up that, hey, maybe Fish and Wildlife should have this, or Department of the Interior, or anybody besides the Department of Commerce. But But there again, you're looking at acts of Congress and this, I don't know how many 100 years of precedent that it's fallen under this within the Department of Commerce. I just don't know the mechanics or the political moves that it would take. But to me, in the short term, that seems insurmountable, even if it makes a ton of sense and would be a great move. I just don't know if it's practical.
Well, it would probably take 20 years for Congress to make anything happen anyway. So.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question too, David. I spent a couple summers in Alaska about a billion years ago. Homer is an amazing place. What you're describing, it sounds like they're literally stealing everything from the tribes, from the fishermen that are, those family fishermen that fish in a good way. It almost sounds like they're taking everything before these people even get a way of life. Like, it's just what's running through my head is this is like pure corporate greed that are going to rape and destroy everything for their God Almighty dollar. And so if these fish are bringing in $2 billion, why couldn't they bring in $2 billion in a more sustainable way? Not that I approve, but I mean, these people have lived on fishing for time immemorial. So why couldn't the $2 billion go to the little guy instead of the huge corporate greed? Is that what's happening? I mean, are they like stealing all the fish runs before they even get to where the little guy fisher can get to it? That's the question.
It is. And so the interesting thing, so trawl as a gear type has historically, I'll check myself for saying this, but when trawl really shines is when you have a large biomass of fish with a super low value. So it's essentially a trash fish that nobody else wants. And so pollock and the lower grade flounder and sole in Alaska, for perspective, they might only sell at first sale on the dock for 5 cents a pound or 9 cents a pound. And so if you and I had small boats, we couldn't physically go out and catch enough pounds of these fish to make it economically worthwhile for ourselves. But trawl can. So they'll tow a net for 4 hours and bring up 200,000 pounds of fish. And a lot of them have switched to this factory trawl dynamic where they bring up the fish, dump it into their own factories, process it, export it mostly overseas, and then can sell it for, say, $5 or $6 a pound as this end product. And every ounce of profit from that fish, from the second it was in the water to the second it hits a grocery store in Europe or Asia or the US, that all goes to this one company that owns the trawl boat. And so through that vertical integration, they can make money off of it, and they make a lot of money off of it. So one of the big points of contention in Alaska is that almost none of this trawl fleet is owned by Alaskans. It's almost all home ported in Seattle, Washington, which is ironic because Seattle, Washington's been at the forefront of like all these green movements, but they still have this big fleet that comes up to Alaska and rakes the bottom for the fish. But so for perspective on that, in 2022, that factory trawl fleet paid to the state of Alaska $9 million in landing tax on this fishery resource that they claim made them $2 billion. So Alaska is receiving pennies, fractions of pennies on the pound for what we're losing. And just the halibut that they caught and wasted in the process is worth more than $9 million. And that halibut would have been caught by local Alaskans. So everything that you said, is correct. There again, it's the Department of Commerce. And so they leverage this. We're making the USA a ton of money from an Alaska first perspective or a subsistence or a rural perspective. We don't get any of it, essentially. We just get the problems. Yeah.
I have a question. I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. So all of this stuff that they're not supposed to catch is just discarded. It's just thrown away.
So
it's really just thrown away. It's like thrown away. Like there's like, really?
Yeah, so there's a couple categories. So there's what they call prohibited species catch, and I say that this is kind of the equivalent of like if a duck hunter was hunting for ducks and accidentally shot an eagle. You could never keep that eagle, you could never sell that eagle. It's like the fisheries regulators are making this acknowledgement that 1 out of 1,000 times somebody accidentally kills this animal they're not supposed to. And so those prohibited species, which are salmon, halibut, and crab for the most part, they don't want to incentivize the trawl fleet to intentionally target them. So yeah, they have this regulation where it has to be discarded or donated. And they do have a donation program, but it donates like fractions of what they catch. And the other section, the not prohibited species catch, is more general. So if you guys are familiar with black cod, sablefish, you'll see in the markets quite a bit. That frequently gets caught by trawlers that are targeting pollock. And so in a lot of fisheries, they'll have this, NOAA has made this acknowledgement that you can have like a 5% black cod bycatch, which you can retain and sell. So if somebody catches 100,000, for every 100,000 pounds of pollock they catch, they can keep and sell 5,000 pounds of the black cod. But that's led to problems too. Nobody wants to see this fish being dumped, but in this case of the black cod, it might be worth $5 a pound, and the pollock is worth 9 cents a pound. And so what we've run into is crew will talk about the captain went out, caught his 100,000 pounds of pollock with no black cod bycatch, but then since it was legal to keep and sell this bycatch, then he moved to a different area, caught the black cod, and added that to his catch at the end of the day intentionally, because a lot of times it's worth more than what they're fishing for in the first place. But yeah, back to your question. So NOAA Fisheries had told us a couple of years ago that over the last 10 years, trawl in Alaska has averaged 141 million pounds of bycatch mortality per year, every year for the last 10 years. So you're talking about 1.4 billion pounds of unintentional catch. And some of that would have been kept and sold, and a lot of it would have been dumped. So.
1.4 billion? Is that what you said?
In 10 years. Yeah, and there's also, there's concerns about whether those numbers are accurate. Most of the trawl boats carry a federal observer on board, but there's been quite a few reports of sexual harassment of the observers or intimidation or intentionally hiding catch. No trawl captain wants to be the guy that gets reported for catching a killer whale. Obviously, that would be hard to hide, but salmon and crab and everything else, there's a lot of stories of the crew saying, make sure the observer doesn't see that or they'll shut down our season type thing. So I consider that 141 million pounds a year to be probably a minimum.
Wow.
A minimum.
Since we're on shocking information and numbers, I want to put this up, and I know you had just posted this on the page today too. Trawl bycatch numbers just from January of this year till a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and it's important to note that these are prohibited species catch. So NOAA Fisheries does this weekly bycatch report, and they break out these prohibited species as, look at this, because they're the important fish that everybody else is fishing for. But with this, there could have been 10 or 15 million pounds of other fish that don't make it into this prohibited species report. So if you break down that 141 million pounds a year, it comes out to them having 1 million pounds of bycatch every 2.58 days for the entire year for decades, essentially. And that's also bycatch. That's what's observed. And so that's where, earlier we talked about how the bottom trawls are down, kind of mowing over bottom habitat. We don't know if they're running over crab. And now we're finding out that what was supposed to be a midwater trawl net is also down on bottom, kind of dredging. And so that's this other X factor of what they call unobserved bycatch. So if 141 million pounds is intact and in the net to be counted on deck, the next question is how much got, crushed essentially on the bottom, or coral that was knocked over. And a frustration for me and a frustration for Alaska is that this unobserved bycatch concern is known and documented, and other countries have taken it on, but NOAA Fisheries essentially just plugs in a zero every time they run their models. So we've heard about like the crash of snow crab and red king crab in the Bering Sea over the last couple of years. And that was where actually all this midwater nets on bottom came out. So they have what they call the crab box. It's supposed to be this little zone where they have banned bottom trawls to preserve red king crab. But that zone is not off limits for midwater trawls. So now we're finding out that these nets that we were told were midwater, which are actually on bottom, have been dredging this crab conservation area again for decades, and nobody knows what happens or if that's related, but it's hard to imagine that it's hasn't, you know.
Wow.
I have another question. I don't mean to dominate with questions, but can they make these boats and nets any size they want? Is there a limit to that? Maybe it's a matter of just regulating the size of these. Maybe they get 2 feet of a net. You know what I mean? Like, can they just make them as giant as they want?
So I think pretty close to that, you know, so that has definitely been an issue through time. This trawling or dragging a net like this has been around for 500 years, and people have been fishing for thousands of years. But kind of part of what is bringing this to a head now is like this factory trawler ship model. So it's like I think the biggest one is around 350 feet. So it's not as big as the biggest cruise ships, but it's a ship, you know. And they say that the net is big enough to like swallow the Eiffel Tower, or to hold 747s inside. They say the biggest ones cover about 6 square miles of bottom each day. So that's one boat, one day, dragging 6 square miles of bottom. So the potential for ecological impact, the numbers on it are astronomical. You know, if you said that one of those boats which drags 6 square miles per day was disturbing or killing even 1 ounce of life on the seafloor per square foot it drug, that would come out to like 13 million pounds of sea life per day disturbed for one boat. So it's a big X factor out there. And like I say, it's been really frustrating that fisheries regulators haven't chased down all these variables. But that's where we also come back to a really strong lobbying group from the trawl sector that is at these meetings and saying, "Oh, we don't need to study that. We've got something more important over here." And unfortunately, they've been really successful. But that's mostly because they just haven't had much opposition or much knowledge from the public. The public doesn't even know this problem exists, so they can't speak up. So.
I'm sorry. Did I hear that right? Did you say 13 billion a day? A day?
No, I'd have to 13 million with an M.
Oh, million. Okay, but still okay. Sorry, I'm taking notes, and my mind is.
And that number is my theoretical. So that's if they disturbed 1 ounce of life per square foot they drug. If you run out the math and convert the miles down to feet, it comes out to about 13 million pounds. So. But even if you took that down to 1 gram of sea life per square foot, it's still astronomical numbers when you multiply it by 365 days a year and all the different boats fishing. So.
Okay, thank you.
I have another question too. Now they're doing all this damage to the sea floor. Isn't this where a bunch of these critters are creating new life? So yeah. Like they're taking all the life, and then they're taking the life that's not even born yet.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, in the ocean, the seafloor is the only habitat. So one guy that had worked on a trawl boat for a few years recently described it to me as like deer hunting with a bulldozer, you know, and you're running down this deer through the forest, but you're doing it with a bulldozer. So you're taking out all these trees and the habitat in the process. And, you know, I'm a fisherman myself, so I take my fair share of fish, but we leave the habitat. And if there's this assumption that if we had to stop fishing tomorrow because the stocks were too low, as long as we have good ocean conditions and good habitat, that the population can come back. But that's the big concern, is if we take out the habitat, then even if we stopped fishing tomorrow, there's no guarantee that it ever comes back. So, Ma, I see your hand up there. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that it's really sort of timely that we're speaking about this today, because back home where I'm from in the UK, actually it was all over the news this Monday. The conservationists condemned France's protests over UK's bottom trawling plan. And basically, to cut a long story short, Great Britain have imposed a ban on, I'm just trying to see how many, protected environments, so it can't be bottom trawled. And France are actually complaining about it. And I think the way it became common knowledge, if you like, back home, is because we are a fishing nation. The whole nation fishes. It's what we've survived on in the past. But there was an environmental group, which I'm just looking for the name of. I think it was Blue Marine Foundation, who actually led this protest, if you like, against, and pushed it towards the government to do something about it. And this was sort of a start for that, you know, protection and conservation. But it looks like it's starting a very common war between the British and the French again. But however, you know, it needs to be protected, and it needs to be studied, and it needs to be pulled back. And if we want to have it all, then they've got to start implementing protection over money. And I know that with the Centre for Biological Diversity, that document that's just been released, that basically going after the government. I know a lot of the tribal communities have give their support to that, because they're the ones that are suffering the most, and you know, they believe that part of that land is theirs, and so that food should be theirs as well. And I can't disagree with that at all. So again, we're going back to, how do we do something about it? And I think it's time we all come together to do something about it, the tribes included, and back one another to be a force so powerful that the government have got to do something about it.
Yeah, I agree. And so I forgot to mention it earlier, but there's a second lawsuit that came out last summer, and that one had been tribal driven. That one wasn't specific to marine mammals, but basically what it's posing this question legally of, are the harvest rates in the Bering Sea sustainable? So what we keep running into are these headlines of, you know, whale strandings, Chinook salmon starving to death, chum salmon starving to death, seals, seabirds, king crab, snow crab, all in the Bering Sea, all starving to death. But we also have this, the pollock harvest limit this year for the trawl fleet is 3.2 billion pounds. And those pollock are being harvested when they're 2 or 3 pounds each, which means they don't get to spawn. And that's bait fish size for a lot of the species. And so this second lawsuit is targeted at that. But like we talked about earlier, trawl needs massive harvest limits because they're catching fish that aren't very valuable per pound. And so that's going to be a battle. But you're right. So the upriver indigenous people on the Yukon and Kuskokwim rivers haven't been able to catch chum salmon or king salmon for the last 4 years, which is in the 10,000 year history of those people is completely unprecedented. So Howard, I saw you had your hand there too.
Thank you for stepping up and telling the world about this. You're kind of a lone voice, but you tapped into something because you got a huge following now on Facebook, at least. And I don't know what other media you might be working with. But what I was wondering is, are there good educational materials. I don't know if that would be videos, and I don't see how you can get a camera down there to show the destruction in action, but it could be animated. And if there were, that kind of material that showed those, just unbelievable numbers of destruction of species and square miles, and just the scale of the damage being done, if that could be presented so that we could send something to representatives, to media, to other groups, to let them know, is there a source for that? Is that being done? I mean, is there something we can use? Because it's really hard to just try to summarize and have a bullet list of, all these points that you're making that are so valuable. But if that can be sort of condensed into a one-page presentable form, it could be really effective, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So there's not, and this is all kind of new. I'd started posting about it in about 2020, and it's, but yeah, as you say, it's ultra fragmented, and I'm still, last night, I looked at a new document and there was 10 new posts of these kind of, oh my gods, I can't believe they did this. So I have this problem in my own mind of trying to, I don't want to give a half picture to people, but I'm still learning. But along what you're saying, I think that our next big step is going to be to move into this like documentary type format. It's getting beyond where we can just do single snapshots of written text or bullet points. I think it's going to have to evolve into this like 30-minute or 45-minute video that has the graphics to show the impact. But right now we're really a pretty ragtag group. I run a couple businesses and do this on my phone on the side, and that's the story for a lot of the other people that have been involved. But it's becoming bigger quickly, so I think like a documentary type format is probably going to be our next step.
Great. Thanks.
Well, yeah. Most of us know people that do that kind of work. Right? Yeah. So I can't recall his name right now, the man who's putting together the docu about the dams. He would be a great person
John Carlos Frey. We can try to put him
hook up with him. Maybe he's got other people that would be willing to shoot some of this video out there. I don't know. The boats probably wouldn't like that much, and maybe would try to, fight off the docu people. But I think that's really the key. You got to put it right in people's faces, I think.
I think he would find the lobbyists and go right to them and ask them the questions, with the data, with the facts, and confront them with that. That would be a good documentary.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential out there for somebody to grab this and like hit a home run off of it, as far as awareness. The people I'm with have been surprised that this has grown so much. I mean, we've added 5,000 people to the group since January 1st of this year, so it's snowballing. Well, Mary Peltola, when she got voted in as the congressperson for Alaska, she'd been working on trawl bycatch in her previous career, so she was really good for awareness.
That's great.
That ball rolling from that aspect. Governor Jay Inslee in Washington is allowed to pick some of the members for the federal council, which regulates trawl, and his preferred name in this last go round is a person, I believe, on the Ocean Conservancy that would replace a trawler on that council. So there's going to be some hope, and that's coming from public outcry, essentially. And another thing, going back to what you said, Howard, so there's not a ton of Alaska-specific, like, the before and after pictures of bottom habitat before they've been trawled and after they've been trawled are super powerful. But there again, if it's the same effect from a trawl net, whether it's in Alaska or Florida or anywhere else. So if you go into Google Images and search like effects of bottom trawl, there's hundreds of those pictures of coral before it had been trawled and coral after it had been trawled. So I definitely encourage people to do that on their own. And if you're trying to explain it to somebody else, you might not find the Alaska example that you want, but there's lots of examples of it happening in other places. So.
David, you've tapped into a group here of helpers, just saying. So, like on your stats and on some of this information, you know, anyone who's watching who wants to maybe assist in getting this all like on a one pager, like Howard's saying, or some sort of document with links, please put that in the chat or send me a message on Messenger and we could put you in touch to be able to assist. A lot of creative folks here. Let's talk a little bit about some of the video that has been taken that you sent me, and this is from 20 years ago. So there shouldn't be a shock when killer whales are caught in these trawls. I mean, do you want to preface what we're about to show, David?
Yeah. So it's been really interesting for me as this group has grown. You know, I'll get random phone calls and messages from people who I've never met, but who've been looking and have experience with trawl, or in the case of this person, he'd been hired to take a boat out and follow the trawl boats 20 years ago to observe killer whale behavior, essentially, or how the trawl fishery out in the Bering Sea was influencing how killer whales evolved, essentially. And so after this headline had come out that trawl in the Bering Sea had caught 10 killer whales last year, I get this phone call of, well, of course they have. You know, I've got 3 hours of video that we took 20 years ago, and all these killer whales do is follow around the trawl boats and eat their bycatch. And he said it's a miracle they haven't caught all of them, you know. But one of the most impactful things he said was that they would put down underwater hydrophones and they would record these killer whales lounging or playing or essentially detached from the trawl boats. But as soon as you could pick up on the hydrophone that the generators had started on the trawl boats that were going to engage the hydraulics to pull the net back in, which means they're going to be dumping bycatch soon, you'd see all the killer whales perk up and they would essentially race to that boat because that was the dinner bell. But he said he also saw, you know, mothers teaching their calves this behavior. This is how you get food in this environment, essentially. So yeah, if you want to play a couple of those, they're, you know, VHS cameras from 20 years ago. So it's not the best picture, but like I said, he sent about 3 hours worth of video of, you know, 50 orcas following the trawl boats and feeding. And these are just a few clips.
There's just a couple of them. And Marcia and I were talking about this because we were both jumping on earlier. Marcia, do you want to share your comments on that?
So, you know, just as a behaviorist, right? Like now this is generational learning with these whales. And they probably, if this is so common around them, they may not hunt at all anymore. This is their primary source of food. So it's stunning to me that, you know, when we were trying to bring Toki up there for a sea pen, you know, in the Salish Sea, there was a lot of fuss about, oh my God, her presence is going to throw off the whale's routines and, you know, all that. This is a billion times bigger than that. And if you stopped trawling today, those whales will probably go through a big slump because they haven't been hunting in their usual way. It's behaviorally a huge catastrophe for them. That's just all. I'll get off my soapbox now, but that's awful.
Yeah, I worry the population has, you know, probably artificially increased because, ironically, living is so good and easy for them. You know, they're not going through the standard rigors of natural selection, essentially, because they have this 24/7 buffet, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of it too. Their natural behavior has been completely thrown off. And if that's 20 years ago, they all learn that now. That's how they survive. That's probably their number one way to survive. It's just awful. I'm blown away right now.
David, does trawling go on 12 months a year?
Pretty close. So they'll set annual harvest limits, usually by pounds, and traditionally that will open up for the year on, I think, January 23rd. So the first 3 weeks of the year is closed to trawl. But in most of the cases I can think of, they essentially fish until they hit their poundage limit for the year. So a lot of times that will go into December. You'll see the last ones cleaning up. But sometimes if they get their pounds sooner, then that shuts the fishery down. But yeah, real close to 12 months. Another thing is that sometimes during the salmon season, they'll quit trawling and then they'll use those boats as tenders. So they'll ferry the salmon back and forth between the on-ground fishermen and the processors. But yeah, long story short, it's pretty close to 12 months a year.
Ma?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, if you had no food and someone was stealing your food, what would you do? You'd do exactly the same as them. It's like, you know, it is easy pickings, and I agree with Marcia. That's how they're learning now. So if they're still hunting, the new generation of orca that are coming through, I'd be very surprised, to be honest. But I honestly think that out of all of this, I think that Jean-Carlos Frey would be absolutely brilliant at, you know, getting to the bottom of it and putting a really good documentary out there. He's done it before for other things. I know he's working on the documentary for the dams as well, but I think he's got the experience that's needed to do it justice and honestly, to tell it honestly the way it is. So it'd be great if we could put him in touch somehow.
I'll send an email with the two of you on it, David, and see if that's, you know.
Thanks, Annette. That would be great.
And
I people are saying on here, you know, just to pay attention to the comments, like we're talking about Alaska, right? You're in Alaska. And then the global issue of it, like it's just so big, you know, and it's not just, and so trying to take, I always tell people that my garage is a disaster. And so I go in there and I look at my garage and it's just like this huge mess. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? And so to be able to break that down into little pieces, it's not a disaster anymore. But I had to like really focus on an area, right? And where should we, David, in your opinion, be focusing on? Like, obviously it's a big issue and we need to focus on all of it. But, you know, you talked about some of the companies being from Seattle. Can we talk a little bit more on that? Like, where can we take a bite on this and to make a difference to start?
Yeah. So one of the, you know, we talk about, so it's the Magnuson-Stevens Act is the rule which regulates federal fisheries. And there's been a couple runs at trying to have that updated with stronger controls on trawl, but that would take, an honest to God act of Congress to pass and renew that. So like I said, they've tried a couple times, but that's languishing. So that's considered a fix, but a pretty slow one. But one of the quickest ways is, so this happens in federal waters, and it's regulated by the North Pacific Fisheries Management Council, which is also kind of under the umbrella of NOAA. And on that council are 11 voting representatives. And the governor of Alaska is allowed to choose 6 of them. The governor of Washington chooses 3. Governor of Oregon chooses 1. And then there's 1 federal National Marine Fisheries representative. And it's a majority rules council. So there's been a lot of heat put on the Alaska governor lately that, if he put better representatives on this council, or ones that were more willing to take on trawl, then we'd have this majority immediately, and could make pretty big changes in a short amount of time. But unfortunately, a lot of the governor of Alaska's most recent picks for this council have been people employed by trawl corporations, or corporations that have stock in trawl fisheries. So that's where I wanted to highlight that Jay Inslee had done a really good job recently in putting a person from the Ocean Conservancy on there instead of a trawler. So, but that could be better. There's still 2 more Washington reps on there. So people that are Washington based could definitely reach out to Inslee and the Washington representatives. The Port of Seattle has gotten a fair amount of heat about this, that they, this is home base for all these trawl ships that tout this real ecological friendly mission, and then take off to Alaska and just whack everything we've got. So that could be another place to put pressure on. And then anybody from any state that has, if we could have the Magnuson-Stevens Act revised in Washington, D.C., that comes down to all our Congress people and all our senators. So no matter where you're from, it would be great to have this on the radar of your local representatives, whoever that may be.
And the name of the act one more time?
Magnuson-Stevens Act. MSA is the abbreviation for it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's actually overdue to be renewed. I think when it was created in the 70s, I think it was supposed to be renewed every 10 years. And it's already out of date on that. They just haven't, there's been other priorities for DC.
And Heather Nicholson, she's asking some questions here. And so I think it'd be good to have her pop on. She's trying to connect. Heather, it says your devices are not connected for some reason. I don't know if you want to get back out and make sure it allows camera and mic, but she's putting some comments up and I don't want to speak on them because I don't have the background. So if we can get her to join here in a minute, that might be good too, just to end, because she's talking about fisheries lobbyists who are now working with the Northwest River Partners. So hopefully she'll be able to come back on. But thank you, because I think that's a good start. And I have a feeling, David, we're going to need you to come back a few times and figure out some sort of partnership on how we can assist. And it's a lot to take in. I'm going to have to go back and I'm not ending the show, by the way, but I'm going to have to go back and review a lot of what we talked about, because it's a lot. It's a whole other thing that, is not in everyone's face. And there's some pretty sad pictures, and I don't need to show those today, but if people go to your page again, you can, visuals are so impactful. And I have that one picture of the 3 folks sitting on the shark, and just it should make people mad. It should make people mad enough to do something, because it's our oceans. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Well, and I think another important thing, so it feels to me like the trawl response to this has been to paint everybody that opposes their type of fishing in this, ecological warrior, or they're radicals, or they're against fishing in general. But that's really not been what's happened in this group. So if you look at the membership, almost all the, maybe I can't say almost all, a majority of the people are from Alaska. A huge amount of them own their own fishing businesses. A huge amount of them rely on subsistence. These people hunt and fish every day, and that's been their entire life, since birth. And that's why Alaska is a unique place. It's the last frontier in that regard. And so that's why I think what we're doing becomes pretty special, is it's more of like this whistleblower format. I myself have issues with bringing up that fishing could be bad, because I realize that could impact my business or my livelihood. And everybody in that group feels that same way, but this is just such a big thing that you can't give it a pass, So, Deborah, I think you'd had your hand up maybe before those videos. I don't know if we got a second here.
I did have, sorry, I have to keep muting. I live with a pack of beasts.
Yeah.
I did have another question. Like, what government organization does the labeling? Like, if people knew, like if you were a meat eater and you had the choice of buying a fish or a piece of halibut from the smaller fishermen that I know are up there in Alaska, the ones that you say, that is their whole life. That's their whole life. I get it. Or the farmer that's like, who labels that? So if your piece of fish that you bought at the store, what if it could be labeled caught by an indigenous family, caught by a traditional small fisherman versus caught by, the trawl? Because the labeling thing, like how it did help the tuna and the dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Is that a thing that like we could start a hashtag? Where's your fish from?
Yeah.
Or that was the question.
For sure. So we've actually I had an owner of a restaurant here in Homer actually sent me some proofs just yesterday. He's made a big focus at his restaurant that none of the fish he serves are caught aboard trawlers. And so he and I are working together on creating this label that he can put on his menu, or maybe for other restaurants specific to a certain dish that says, trawl free. This entree is trawl free. And our hope is to expand that out, that we can start sending them out to the artisanal fishermen, the owner operators that catch their fish not on trawl, so they can start adding their own label to the package. Because you're right, there's nowhere in any of the major organizations or the government that differentiates that. And one of the other big problems we've seen in trawl especially is that when a certification organization like the Marine Stewardship Council, they do that little blue label, MSC certified, when they certify a fish, they typically look at the biomass of just that fish, or they put too much emphasis into that, I should say. So like in the case of Alaska, if the pollock stocks are doing fine and that's the target fish, they say, well, check mark, pollock isn't endangered. But the rest of the story is that maybe while we're catching these pollock, we're impacting the salmon and the crab and the marine mammals and everything else. So yeah, that's a great idea, and hopefully that's coming out. But like I say, we're pretty ragtag at the moment, but that also keeps it authentic. Alaskans have this huge fear of what we perceive as environmental groups that want to come in painting with a broad brush and shut down all fisheries, or that's just, that makes Alaskans cringe a little bit, So though homegrown is slow, it also allows us to kind of control the message and make sure that we're pinpointing the big players, essentially. So.
Yeah. And Samuel's posting, what did he say here? To boycott, where did it go? To boycott every product that is sourced in the trawl fishery. I mean, we just need to know how to identify it, Yeah.
Well, and so there's a few, it's not, it's huge because we're talking about billions of pounds hitting the market, and it's ultra cheap protein. So you'll see it mixed into all kinds of things. But a few of the classic examples, like the McDonald's Filet-O-Fish sandwich is made of trawl caught pollock. And I believe that all the fast food fish sandwiches are either pollock or flounder, which would be trawl caught. And then surimi is a big one, like the fake crab that you get in California rolls. That's made out of like it's like the hot dog of the sea, we call it. And so that's a great one to avoid if you can, but you'll see like surimi mixed into all kinds of different products. So
Heather, let's test your mic real quick. We can't see you, but I don't know if you have a cover on your computer there, but can we see if we can hear you?
Yeah. How am I? Am I audible?
You're audible. We hear you.
Okay, great. Hi.
Hi. Thanks
I
for
don't know. Yeah, thanks. I don't know. Thank you, David. And I just had been putting in a few links on, I had come across a lobbyist named Justin LeBlanc, who's now working to keep the lower Snake River dams in place and working with Northwest River Partners lobbyists. And I had seen that he had done some fisheries lobbying throughout his time. And so I shared that. And then I also had noticed recently there's an amendment to the Magnuson-Stevens Act regarding streamlining something about confidentiality for data for the observers. And I just don't know which way it goes, if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but thought I would throw that in there and bring it to your attention.
Yeah, I think that Magnuson-Stevens amendment you're talking about, so there's a lawsuit currently going through on whether the government can require that fishing boats pay for their own observer coverage. So a lot of times the government will say that you guys have to have a fisheries observer along on every trip you go on, or some percentage of trips. And currently they're also required to bear that cost on their own. And there's a lawsuit going through that maybe changes that. And I'm not sure if I'm even on the right track or if that has concluded or not, but it wouldn't be great because it would sort of rewrite the observer system as we know it. But
Well, this is in the Federal Register, and the public comment period ends fairly soon. And I tried to skim through the language and make heads or tails of it, but without the background, it was difficult for me to do. So, yeah.
Well, and so one thing I should say, we talked a little bit about the NPFMC earlier, which is the federal group which regulates trawl. Alaska governor picks 6, Washington governor picks 3, Oregon 1. But the NPFMC has these fisheries regulating meetings 5 times a year. So they just got done with their April meeting, but their next one will be at the start of June. And in the lead up to that, they do about a 2-week public comment period. And that's free to do. It's an online form. There's no requirement for how dynamic or undynamic the letters can be. A lot of people just put in a paragraph, and other people put in a 30-page document. But it would be great for people to be tuned into that. And, they'll have agenda items that you can comment specifically on, like a crab bycatch limit or a salmon bycatch limit. But there are also kind of some open categories. So if you guys wanted to take on killer whales specifically, or a marine mammal, or another issue up here, that would be the place to do it. And that all goes into the official record. They usually ignore what we say, but at least we're putting it out there. And that's starting to get attention from politicians and the media and other people as well. So it's a good spot to throw in your 2 cents, and it's a pretty easy process. I'll try and give you guys reminders when that comes up at June. Long story short. So
I appreciate that. I just went in and checked some. I keep trying to post the link because I know there's a lot of comments, and I want everyone to be able to find your group. So you'll see me keep posting that, guys, and go in and follow the group. I don't know if you have to approve people or not, David. I'm not sure how that works on there, but looks like you have about 60 more folks to break your 35, and I think we'll get that today, because this is an important issue. So I will be sharing your group. I hope everyone on screen and everybody watching will share the group, because this is an important topic for us to be following. It's not about numbers, it's about awareness. And the more people that are aware, the more that can be done to support. And gosh, I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. I'm so glad. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I'm good. We can hang out and chat all day, but I don't know what your plans are for the day, David. So I'm going to just kind of check in with the folks around the room, and then anyone who's watching, if you have any questions, please put those in now. Howard, is there anything you want to mention or ask before we start to wrap up?
Well, no, just thanks again. This has been highly educational, and I'll be looking at your page for further information and materials, and we'll go from there. Thanks a lot, David.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Marcia?
Thank you so much, David. I have like so many notes I've been taking through this whole conversation. So, it just reminds me real quick. I spoke to Giles months and months ago when we were in Seattle about what her gravest concerns were about the southern residents. And she told me the Alaskan trawlers, the dams are her second one because those fish don't have boundaries and borders, and they would swim down, into the Salish Sea and the Puget Sound, and they don't. And it's really primarily, she thinks, because of these trawlers. So I really appreciate you doing this. And now you got us on the case. So
Yeah.
we're going to help out. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have Brandy commenting, and so I think just the information you shared today, we will put together in a document and send to you, David, that you can share, and any other stuff. Maybe we could just start a running document with links for folks who want to help and make a difference. Deborah?
Yes, thank you, David. I have this this memory of Alaska and how idyllic it was and how, original and down to earth. And I am guilty. I didn't even know that trawlers were up there destroying all that of what I remembered. I even worked on a salmon fishing site for a summer. So it was like, they're really destroying it. I'm guilty. I didn't know. Thank you.
Well, and that's been a big thing. So we keep coming across this analogy of like, if this was happening on land, we'd call it strip mining, or we'd call it clear cutting a forest, and everybody could see it and it would stop tomorrow, where the rules have already been written to stop it, because obviously that's not sustainable. But most of it happens in remote areas and it happens underwater. So it's the definition of out of sight, out of mind. So I appreciate you guys bringing awareness to it, because it's as soon as somebody hears about it, it's not a very hard ethical debate on whether it's good, unless you're one of the ones profiting from it. So
Thank you. Ma?
Yeah, just, echo what everybody has already said. But if there's anything we can do, we're here. All you've got to do is just, shoot us or shoot me a message, and we're totally do whatever we can to bring awareness to other people, and, support you whichever way we can. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Deb Cruz?
Thank you. And it's not always a good thing to hear of another problem that we got to deal with, but keep us posted, because it's so important. And thank you for being a Lone Ranger for right now. We'll work to see that you get some help too.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Heather, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, hi. Thanks for letting me join. I feel like the invited late guest. This is just crucial to learn about and get these details. I mean, we can't overlook this. As ugly as it is, we've got to face it and take it on and understand it. And so I'm happy to provide any research on lobbyists. I mean, that's where it always lies, right? Is who's plying for what, where, and how. And, it's a good thing. There's a lot of work being done by folks on accountability and transparency who have made it possible for us to learn who lobbyists are, who's paying them. That's not a given. That was a lot of hard work to keep that in the publicly accessible sphere. And so we should use it. There are databases, and I'm always happy to help do some research, and they should be upfront. I mean, if they believe in what they're doing, they should be upfront about it, right? Have that conversation.
Thanks, Heather. Christina?
I really appreciate you coming on, David. I really do. And I just have one more quick question about, do you know of anybody else who has done the ban on trawling besides Greece?
I don't, but I think you can thump that into Google and come up with.
Okay.
And, ironically, the USA has done quite a few bottom trawl bans. But it's been about 10 years ago. I think they had this interesting headline where they'd passed this, so like the North Pacific, you fall off the continental shelf and it goes into like 10,000 feet of water, and that's not where the fish live. That's not where the fishing happens. And so we'll see the government like ban that part of the ocean to trawling and say, hey, we banned 8 million square miles of the ocean to trawl, like worship us, and we're like, well, that's not where it happened. And so that's what most recently happened was it's a really interesting Seattle Times article, but there's one line in there where the reporter says, interestingly, they made an exception on this entire trawl ban for where trawl was already occurring. So they banned everything except where the fish are and where the fishing happens, so. But
Okay.
par for the course, I guess. So.
Well, thank you. Appreciate you.
Yeah, for sure.
We touched on this chart, but I don't know that I left it up long enough. Do you mind if we kind of just break down this again before we go to show people what's, allowed?
Yeah. So this is a pretty interesting one. This comes from one of the MSC certifications for bottom trawl. And you can see, so one of the things that the MSC likes to see is that there are limits or triggers put on marine mammals and bycatch. I think a red flag for them is that, say there was no limit on how many killer whales you could catch each year. That would be bad. But if you look at this one, the second and third lines down, in one area, they can catch 24 killer whales a year. And on the other one, they can catch 5.8. So basically, yeah, there's a limit, and yeah, there's a trigger which fulfills like the MSC's needs to certify it. But on the other hand, it's 30 killer whales. And the next line is that they can catch 9,700 ribbon seals and 300 stellar sea lions. So that's just where, you run into this fight between lobbying and common sense. Common sense, we can fix this chart real quick, but the lobbyists say, well, that's a biologically accepted limit, and on, and that has validity too. But there again, it's 2024, and we've had a lot of failings in a lot of oceans. So it's maybe time to update how we do business, I guess. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then I'll leave everyone with the latest or recent numbers. Again, if you weren't watching earlier, this is the trawl bycatch numbers from January of this year to April 6th. And what areas does this cover?
So these are grand totals for the state of Alaska, but the two main areas that trawl happened in Alaska are the Gulf of Alaska and the Bering Sea. And one other thing, we've talked about the Facebook group, and it's got a ton of members in it now. And so fair warning, that's become this really interesting melting pot of, this isn't a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not necessarily just an Alaska issue or a lower 48 issue. And so we get this big eclectic group of, it's tough to control that rolling ball of what in every other aspect of life would be different interests and priorities. We all agree that this trawl issue is a problem. So as a moderator for the group, we try and keep it clamped down and try not to let it become too political to one side or the other. But there's a lot of pro fishermen in there, and there's a lot of people that don't think fishing should exist, but everybody does their best to coexist and say that this is a top priority for everybody, and that once we take care of this, then we can fight our other fights, I guess. So.
All right. Thanks again, David. I know, I'm sure we're going to have you back on if you will. And then the gentleman that I think took some of those videos, if we can get him on as well to talk about, his experiences. That was 20 years ago. It's clearly still happening, and those orcas are still following these trawls around for food. But You guys, thank you so much. Howard, I'll just check in with you real quick. Anything final before we close?
No, thanks. No, I'm all set. Thanks again, Dave. And I'll be keeping very close attention to this.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. And David will be in touch soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
All right.
guys. Have a good week. See you next week.